The topic of the new budget resolution and the state of emergency at the southern border is almost a week old at this point. I didn't want to make a video about this right away because so many people were talking about so many things, there were so many facts flying around, and most of the claims that were going on were unvetted at the time. In fact, my immediate reaction to everything that was going on with the southern border and with the state of the emergency and the budget resolution has completely changed in the last 7 days. So let's have a look at what's actually going on at the southern border and what we've learned in the last week about it. This past Friday, the president signed a continuing resolution that would have kept the government open until October. The resolution included $1.3 billion for border security and the wall funding, essentially, but it was nowhere near the $5.7 billion the president asked for back in December when all of this started happening. It wasn't even the $1.6 billion that was initially proposed to the president when the argument started, and the president initially asked for the $5.7 billion. In addition to having the wall funding, this continuing resolution bill included a lot of restrictions to the president and the executive branch as to how they were going to conduct border security, and even had provisions in it to reduce some of the ways of holding illegal immigrants while they await trial, or asylum seekers while they await any sort of judgment from the federal government. Immediately after the resolution was signed, the president held a press conference in which he declared that we are officially in a state of emergency over events that happen at the southern border. President Trump cited the fact that the southern border is used as a drug corridor to bring hardened drugs from Mexico and Central America into the United States, as well as a human trafficking corridor to bring women and children, again, from Latin American countries into the United States. Now, one of the reasons that this didn't get talked about on Sunday is that even since Sunday, so much new information has come out about what a continuing resolution means, what a national emergency means, why the president can declare a national emergency, and how many national emergencies we actually have going on in this country. The president's ability to declare a state of national emergency for whatever it is that he wants to take care of comes from a law that was passed in 1976, the National Emergencies Act. Now, the National Emergencies Act was meant to streamline the idea of what goes on in a national emergency, but it was still specifically left very ambiguous at the time. And there are a lot of definitions that could be in this act that don't happen to sit there, and I think that's a part of the reason that this is such a big issue to Democrats who designed the National Emergencies Act, and the population in general, whether they are for the president or against the president. And this is far from our first state of emergency in this country. Before the state of emergency was declared, there were a lot of people that wanted to go on social media, and the mainstream media helped to perpetuate this myth that this was going to be a precedent-setting event that's never happened before. In fact, we've been in a state of emergency almost constantly since 1976 when the National Emergencies Act was passed. Fact-checking site Snopes cites the fact that every president since 1976 has had at least one national emergency that they have declared. Clinton, Obama, and George W. Bush all had declarations of national emergencies numbering in the double digits, and we are currently still under the auspices of 31 national emergencies to date. So this is not a new thing by any means. In fact, Trump has had one of the lowest numbers of national emergencies in his presidency, at 3. The reaction to the state of emergency is just about the reaction you would expect in today's political climate. Those who are faithful to the president are extremely glad about the fact that he is fulfilling a campaign promise that he made for the entire time he was running down the campaign trail. But it goes further than that. He is also fulfilling a campaign promise that almost every president for the last 40 years has made while he is going down the campaign trail as well. However, the reaction of those who oppose the president is also just about what you would expect in today's political climate. As of right now, there are 16 states coming together to sue the executive branch over the declaration of national emergency, citing the fact that it is circumventing Congress and he's going against the Constitution. Now, I don't know if this is going to be an easy lawsuit for the 16 states to win. I'm sure the Trump legal team has gone through and made sure that everything that he did was legal and to the letter of the law, including every letter that's in the National Emergencies Act of 1976. Additionally, as predicted, the Ninth Circuit Court is preparing a judgment that would block the order for national emergency. And while this would likely be overturned for the exact same reasons I believe that these lawsuits from the 16 states would be difficult to win, a block from the Ninth Circuit Court has a different effect than these 16 states suing the president. If the Ninth Circuit Court were to come forward and block the order of national emergency, it would tie the decision up into the courts for almost a year at this point, well into 2020, and it may tie it up beyond. What this would do would be to give talking points to those who oppose the president, especially those who are running for president themselves. So long as the decision is tied up in the courts, those who are running for president in 2020 will have plenty of talking points to put into their campaign ads as they fight amongst each other throughout 2020, and as one of them eventually goes on to fight against the president in November for the general election. On principle, I stand against the fact that we are in a national emergency to do something that should have been done legislatively in the first place. But I understand why we're here and how we got here. A lot of people criticize Congress, and especially the president, for the fact that we didn't do this while the president and the Republican Party had a majority in both houses, but it's not really that simple. Budgetary items require a supermajority in the Senate, and while Mitch McConnell did have a majority in the Senate, it wasn't a supermajority. Of course, he could have invoked the nuclear option at any time, but as we saw with Elena Kagan and then with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, that's a dangerous thing to invoke because the other side can turn around and use that against you as soon as they come back into power. Like it or not, we are in a state of congressional gridlock right now, and it is highly unlikely the fact that anything is going to happen in the next 2 years legislatively. We won't see anything happen on the lawmaking side until the next election in 2020, and that is assuming that we can come up with a way to either get enough centrists back into Congress that they will work together and do something, or one party or the other actually takes both houses again. With nothing able to get through Congress, the president is using all the powers that he has at his disposal to fulfill a campaign promise that he made, and one of the campaign promises that might have been the big thing that got him elected in 2016 in the first place. Polls show that the wall is wildly popular among the American people, even if the president and the politicians that are advocating for it are not. As far as the law that gives the president the ability to do this, well, that's another topic entirely. There are people in Congress who say that this law is completely ambiguous. There are people in Congress that say it was never intended for the president to be able to do anything like this when the law was passed, and that may very well be true. You have to keep in mind that there are tinfoily people out there who believe, and I understand where they're coming from when they say this, that this law came out very shortly after Watergate, and Democrats in Congress believe that there was never going to be another Republican president again. Therefore, they could pass a law like this, and they would be completely safe from any sort of negative repercussions that would ever come from it. I don't know if that was the intent of the 90th Congress, but I know that the 116th Congress is fully intent on either eliminating this law entirely now that they understand that it could be used for things that they don't like, and things that they have adamantly tried to block for the entire time that they've been in session, or at least get a definitive answer as to what the powers of national emergency mean. The National Emergencies Act has been invoked dozens of times since it was passed in 1976, and it's been used for things like going to war or appropriating funds for a government project without congressional approval. I would be okay with it if the 116th Congress could come together and repeal this law. I'm not going to say it's unconstitutional because, of course, the Supreme Court has ruled and passed that it is constitutional. But what I will say is the fact that it will move the executive branch away from the monarchy that our founding fathers feared that it was going to become, and the monarchy that we even today fear that the executive branch is going to become. What do you think about the fact that we're in a state of national emergency over the southern border? And what do you think about the other national emergencies that we're still living under to this day? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at Ed's Blog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care. You're